Hello and welcome back to the Prefect Podcast. Warren, you stop laughing. We are going today to be interviewing our Mr. Thomas, who does not want to appear on the camera, so we're just filming ourselves instead. I hope you enjoy it. In the last video, we talked to Mrs. Peck about philosophy and religious studies. Today, we're going to be talking about maths, Mr. Thomas, and some interesting things about him as well. So, do you want to start off with a question?
Yeah, okay. Well, the first question we prepared for Mr. Thomas, which is the one that we asked Ms. Peck last time, is, Mr. Thomas, what are 3 interesting facts about you that you think we can share?
See, the thing about being British is that you're very uncomfortable blowing your own trumpet, as it were. So, interesting facts about me. I suppose I've lived in 5 continents. I've camped on the highest point of the contiguous US. And yeah, I've driven a motorbike even higher than that, to nearly 6,000 meters.
Where was the motorbike trip, sir?
That was in Ladakh in North India.
Thank you.
You seem to have gone to a lot of different places. You're a very well-travelled man. So, can you tell us the different kind of cultures and experiences you've had in different places?
Well, before I became a teacher, I was traveling for hedonistic purposes mostly. But I soon realized once I'd become a teacher that I could use that as a vehicle to experience different cultures and different geographies. And so for my first job, which was in Africa, with a great mixture of nationalities and cultures, through to working in a very expensive elite, or you could call it finishing school in Switzerland, to North African experiences in Egypt via Malaysia and ending up in Hong Kong and the Far East. The variety has been astounding. I would certainly say my favourite culture for the way that people treat each other and respect each other is the current culture that I'm experiencing in the Far East.
Indeed. So do you think that it's easier to experience a culture when you're traveling in a top-class finishing school or just a normal school? Do you think are the best ways to experience the culture?
I think experiencing the culture is very much up to the individual and how they immerse themselves. In every country that I've lived in, except this one, I've become quite competent in the language. This is the first time I've failed, mostly because there's been no necessity here. And so I would say I'm not as ingrained in the culture or embedded in the culture here as I have been in my other places because of that. That's a result of necessity here more than anything, because it's obviously very easy to function in Hong Kong without any language skills.
You know, I think everyone's quite intrigued about your sort of hobby of riding a motorbike, since sometimes we just see you coming up and down the hill with the bike. Why do you enjoy this motorbike so much? And what do you think? Why do you think it's a better way to travel? Why do you prefer it than maybe using a normal bike or a car?
I think in my early days of my life, when I wasn't traveling, this was a way I could escape. This is a way I could sense freedom. This is a way I could sense excitement and individualism in a way. So from the very early days when I discovered motorbikes in my late teens, and it's been a route to escape. It's more been a practicality in Hong Kong for traffic and parking reasons. I think it's inevitable that all fossil fuel powered vehicles are going to be extinct within a decade or two. But in the meantime, the comparison between impact of motorcycles and single or just 2 people in a car means that there is an environmental element to it. But to be honest, it's the fun, it's the excitement, it's the buzz I get even from driving to work in the morning over Stonecutters Bridge as the sun is rising.
Yeah. And, well, I guess I want to ask a follow-up question. You talked about the sort of fun you get from traveling. So how has the last 2 years of COVID impacted you, and how have you found alternative ways to sort of enjoy outside traveling?
It's extremely difficult to answer that without sounding like an overprivileged member of society. Obviously, we have incredible entitlements in our life. In many ways, we're very lucky to be in Hong Kong in the way that the authorities have dealt with the pandemic, but I can't help but feel sad that I'm not traveling. I very much feel lucky that I fell into teaching, and I still get great fun out of teaching. Some of my classes might not recognise that, but I do. I get great fun out of that. But I can't deny one of the many reasons that I've maintained over 35 years in teaching is the opportunities for travel that I have, both while working and in between working, and I miss that hugely.
So, what do you learn from teaching so many different students for this kind of 35-year period?
Well, it's been a long journey for me, and it might surprise you all to know, and your listeners to know, that I wasn't always the kind of mellow, relaxed teacher that you will see now.
Just for a bit of context, you're both in Mr. Thomas's classes.
But of course, yeah, I learned to teach in the UK. I had to do a little bit of teaching in the UK in between my international jobs. When during that time I had chairs thrown at me and students jumping out of windows on the second floor. So when you move to countries where education is valued, like it has been in many of the places I've worked, then obviously it's a different job to the job that my colleagues who work in difficult situations in the UK face. I have utmost respect for people who work in those schools full of kids who challenge them and kids who have more challenging backgrounds and less support. I'm very thankful for the fact that I can get on with my job of teaching and allow students to do their job of learning and entertaining me.
From your experience, what do you think is really the main cause of this rebelliousness in the UK? Is it just the lack of support, or are there other reasons for the value of education?
It's hard to say. Obviously, teachers, along with nurses and many service industry employees, are not valued in the way they are rewarded in the UK. They're not necessarily valued in the status that their career is viewed compared to lawyers and doctors and even people working in finance to some extent. And so that has a trickle-down effect for sure. But clearly there's an impact on of economic issues, family background issues, and even cultural issues in how much education is valued within families and within society.
Well, related to our previous question, I'm just curious of how you've noticed the student cohort has sort of changed in the 35 years that you've been teaching. Do students act the same way throughout the years, or have you noticed certain sort of obvious changes in student behaviour?
It's hard for me to compare because there is a cultural element to it. And while in some parts of the world education has changed to be more interactive, is not so teacher-led, you can then move to a different part of the world where it's a cultural thing to expect teachers to lead. So it's nice that we have the situation here where we have students who are prepared to be involved in their education and interactive in their education. And that's the way that education has changed. But it's very hard to compare my very mixed race school in Kenya to my very expensive school in Switzerland to my largely Arabic student body in Egypt and even with here. So that's not a comparison that I can really make.
So why did you get into maths in the first place?
So many of my life decisions are because it's the thing that brought me joy. It's the thing that I had most fun in. Is that because I was good at it? I don't know. I wouldn't say it was just that. I think I appreciated the beauty in maths from the beginning, but it was also because I was successful at it. And I didn't immediately fall into teaching that. The automatic route for maths graduates in the UK is through into finance industries, and that was my initial plans. But I soon came to realise that if I was going to enjoy the adventure of life, feel like I was getting a little bit of a reward from it, then investment analysis for an insurance or an actuarial company wasn't going to do it for me.
Well, you talked about the beauty of maths. Could you sort of explain a bit more of what you find really beautiful about maths, and especially to students who are listening?
I think there's just an elegance. There's an elegance to mathematics, and especially pure mathematics. I think if you can appreciate the elegance or the beauty of a well-constructed argument, whether that's a logical argument in a court of law, whether it's in a history lesson, or whether it's in its purest form, which is obviously algebraic mathematics, then if you can appreciate that beauty or that elegance, then you're going to have a more fulfilled life.
So this Prefect podcast is all about helping students as well. So how do you think that students can help their transition from GCSEs to A-levels? Because it can be quite a jump at times.
The only thing that you can encourage students to do that's going to make it possible to access the higher content more easily is to really imbue them with a desire to understand what they're doing. The whole of education has changed from like a rote learning culture of 30 or 40 years ago to a search for understanding now. And if you can encourage students to not accept following a set of instructions without understanding those instructions, then that means they're going to have the depth of understanding, perhaps even more the enjoyment of the subject, that will allow them to link together all the different areas of the subject and gain that success later on.
We've got quite a controversial question here for you. Just one last question. I know that your time is precious. Should people, do you think, be forced to do maths in IGCSE, or do you think it is an unnecessary requirement?
Whether you call it maths or whether you call it something else, I think the biggest skills that everyone needs to develop are really just twofold. That is to be able to communicate and to be able to problem solve. And while there are other elements to communication, maths has some impact on that, but I think it is also the purest way of developing problem solving skills that as a people, as a race, as a planet, we're going to need to solve all our problems in the future.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think that's a wonderful place to end.
Indeed, if you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel or check out our podcast on Harrow Podcast. I forgot the name of it, but it doesn't really matter. Stay safe, my friends. See you soon. I'll see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.